celebrating her 90th birthday party today. But
I know. Is this my coffee? For me? I said, keep. I don't want to spill it. That's all. Oh, would you give my love?
well, and then I'm going to learn
Yeah, oh my God. That's lovely. Good morning. Hi. Wow. I won't have to mess with the air conditioning today. God, is it cold in my house. Whew. Sorry? Yeah? It's awfully cold. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I hope everyone had a lovely holiday.
How about you?
Nice. It's been nice. Vancouver was very nice. Lovely, lovely people, beautiful town, great Jewish community. It was a nice, I don't know if you know this, but it's in Canada's another country. They speak almost perfect English, and so you forget for a minute that you're in another country. But it really isn't. Like, you turn the news on, it's different news. They have different government problems, and they have health care. It's a real interesting thing, and it's a more communitarian society. That's true. Yeah, a few. Yeah. What? Not in Vancouver. Vancouver's not so much maple syrup. Vancouver's, sushi. A lot of salmon. A lot of sushi. A lot of salmon. Yeah. My Shabbos there is lovely. Lovely people. Very, very interesting people. Lovely community. It was nice to be there. So thank you. Good morning. Shabbat Shalom. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. I hope that you had a lovely holiday with your families and friends. And I then hope everybody went out yesterday shopping, supporting the American economy. Oh, come on. It's Black Friday. Did you see it? Online, right? Yeah. There's funny pictures all over the world. So somebody posted a picture, a big poster in Mea Shearim, which is the most Orthodox neighborhood in the world, in the middle of Jerusalem. A giant poster that said Schwarze Freitag, which means Black Friday in Yiddish. And then it had all the sales going on in all the shops in Mea Shearim. So this horrible American custom has reached even the depths of orthodoxy, Because according to the legend, and I'm just quoting a legend, don't tell me if it's true or not, for retailers, they're in the red up until this week. And for certain retailers, and it's only this week with the beginning of Christmas shopping that they start turning a profit. So it's red until now, and then it turns black from now to the end of the year. That's why it's called Black Friday. And then you have Giving Tuesday, Cyber Monday.
No Singles Day.
No, what?
Singles Day. So Alibaba, they have something called
Singles Day, yeah.
And 20 billion in one day in China.
20 billion in one day? Well, 20 billion in one day is a slow shopping day in China. I mean, when you're dealing with 1.2 billion people, That's amazing. Anyway, we didn't get to the mall yesterday. So usually our custom to go to the mall just to see. We had other things we had to do. But does anybody get to the mall yesterday? Was it full of people? The news report said it wasn't as crazy. That because of online shopping, people don't camp out anymore. Remember how people used to camp out? They camped out in front of Best Buy. Best Buy, yeah? Really?
Yeah. Thursday night they were camped out.
Thursday night, wow.
What people are doing now is they're using their iPhone.
Yeah.
They go in and they check the prices, and then they check the prices from the stores.
Yeah, and online. You check the online price. Yeah.
Some people already have the shopping cart full, and then once it turns Black Friday, press the button.
Is that how it works? Oh, who knew these things? I don't know these things. Wow. Yeah, Olive Eye. Yeah, 4 or 5 more TVs. Anyway, welcome. Good morning. It's good to have you here. Following our learning this morning, you're welcome to come and join us for prayers. There's a service in the synagogue this morning. The Galef family celebrates the bar mitzvah of their youngest grandchild and the birth of their first great-grandchild. So we're celebrating together with Steve and Tema. Following that, this coming week, it's December. Can you believe this? It's amazing. So on Wednesday night, College of Jewish Studies, we'll continue our conversations about the great debates that have shaped Jewish life. And our guest Wednesday night is Professor Gail Leibowitz of the AJU, who's going to introduce us to the Talmudic tradition. The Talmudic tradition, and which include the question of how you read, how you live Scripture. So we'll begin with Hillel and Shammai, and spend most of our evening on Akiba and Ishmael, the two great scholars of the 2nd century, who debated how the Torah comes to life, and they form the core of the Talmudic tradition. So everybody's invited on Wednesday night. Of course, that's free. Come in, and everyone, and there's good cookies. Come in. Nice to see you. Good. Yeah, Parsha discussion after service this morning. My wife Nina would like to remind all the women in the community that the Neshama Minyan is having their annual retreat in January. It's a Shabbos at Brandeis Bardin. The topic this year is healing through the arts, and she's collected a group of wonderful artists to speak about what art does to a soul. So please come and join. It's a really nice Shabbos, by the way. They have really beautiful prayer and beautiful learning and lovely fellowship. It's one night. It's a Friday night, and we should have a husband's meal or something at the same time. But anyway, it's in the middle of January, and everyone, all the women in the community and their friends are invited to share that as well. Okay. Anything else in the Shabbaton that I need to know about? Sorry. Oh, tell us about Miriam. Go ahead. Yeah.
For those of you who know Miriam Allman, very active member of the synagogue, she just turned 90, and her children are having a celebration for her today. Can
That's
you hear
okay.
me?
No, it doesn't go out here. It's just in.
Oh, okay.
It's the
anyhow,
world gets to hear you. So.
She has been sick. She's living in a senior facility, and but she is having her 90th birthday
Well, we
party.
wish Miriam many good years of strength and
Beautiful
health.
lady. No, it's at her son's house at noon.
Come crash the birthday party.
Huh?
Come crash her birthday party. Okay, we're on page 146 in the Chumash. If everyone has one, if you didn't get one, we can go get some few. There's a few here. Pop, you good? You all right? Thanksgiving was all right? Good. Eile Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham. Avraham holid et Yitzchak. Vayehi Yitzchak ben Arbaim Shana. This is the story of Isaac. So this is almost a launching of a new set of narrative. We've just covered the narrative of Abraham, and in the last chapter, last week, so I heard water dripping. I've heard water dripping all weekend. I don't know. So Abraham passes away and he's buried. So now the new narrative, we enter into the new narrative, and the new narrative is the next generation. In a certain way, this really is the beginning of the story. The story of the founder is always somehow sui generis. It's unique because the founder doesn't inherit the tradition. The founder creates the tradition. So the question is, what do you do if you're the son? How does the son inherit a tradition from his father and continue it into the next generation? And how much of it is his own and how much of it belongs to the father? How much of it is just a continuation, a transmission, and how much of it is his own creation? This is a different dynamic. So here begins the story. Now, the story is the story on itself is a remarkable narrative. This is one of the most vivid and interesting and challenging narratives of the whole Torah. And just the story itself, we've done this in past years. We just enjoy the story itself because it's too good a story just to pass by. The question is it just a story? What else is it? Is it just a story? So our ancestors, for example, read this as a parable. The rabbis of the Midrash read Esau and Yaakov, Jacob and Esau, as a parable. Esau is Edom. He's the ancestor of Edom. Edom are the Edomites. They're a tribe that lives next to us, slightly to the east. But in the rabbinic mind, Edom is Rome. It's the Roman Empire. First of all, the word Edom, Adom means red, and the Romans wrapped themselves in red. And Edom, Asaph is Rome, and Jacob is Israel, is us. So they're living in this politically fraught moment when the Romans are viciously oppressing Jews in Palestine and Israel, and the question, and you can't outwardly, criticize the government without getting hurt. So you create a parable. So everything they read about Edom and Yaakov is read as a parable of the political relations between Rome and Israel. And then it gets expanded as the generations go on, and the Roman Empire falls, and then is supplanted by the Christian Empire, by the Byzantines and the Christians. Then Edom becomes a representation of the powers of the world. And we are living under the hegemony of the powers of the world. And the question is, how do you live under that hegemony? And who is really in charge of the world? The Jew of the Middle Ages had a massive problem of cognitive dissonance. The Jew of the Middle Ages wanted to believe that he was a chosen person of the God of the universe. The Jew of the Middle Ages wanted to believe that he was serving the God of the universe, that his mitzvah, that his religious devotion was in some ways powering the universe. But empirically, the world that he lived in on a day-to-day basis kept saying to him, you're a nobody. You're an absolute nobody. Your people have no power. Your people are peripheral. Your people they don't even have the power to affect the conditions of their own existence. You live where the Christians or the Muslims let you live. You live under whatever laws the Christians and the Muslims impose upon you. How can you say that you are a chosen person of the God of the universe when the simple facts of your existence belie that? And so the Jew retreats to this narrative and says, it might look that the powers of the world control everything, but in fact they don't. In fact, we actually control everything. This is really a little strange Jewish neurosis, that we think that we're the center of the universe, despite the fact that we keep getting beat up by the neighborhood bullies, right? So the idea is that, so you read these narratives and you read Jacob the trickster and Esau as the powerful one, and you realize that Esau's power is an illusion, that the power of the world, political power, is an illusion. And there's a different layer, there's a different structure of power in the universe. And this narrative solves, or at least salves, doesn't solve, but it somehow mitigates the empirical problem, the cognitive dissonance between the world that I live in and the sense of myself that I carry. That becomes this, that's what this narrative is for, if you're a medieval Jew reading this as Midrash, right? This is, just to give you one really bad analogy, it's the Superman narrative. Right? Superman was created by two kids on their way to Hebrew school in Cleveland who kept getting beat up because they had to walk through an Irish and Italian neighborhood. So what happens if you're, a Jewish kid with thick glasses who has to walk through a neighborhood and the toughs of the neighborhood beat you up week after week? How do you maintain your sense as being a chosen person? So you create this wonderful narrative that on the outside I'm a mild-mannered Jewish Hebrew school kid. It's only on the inside that I know I come from another planet with powers and abilities far beyond those of ordinary men and women, right? And I wear a big S on my chest. Well, I have a mezuzah, but that's the idea. No, the idea that outwardly I am a nerdy, I'm weak, I'm passive, I'm ineffectual, I'm impotent. It's only inside that I know that I'm a man of steel. I mean, did it ever occur to you, strange, that Clark Kent worked at a newspaper full of investigative reporters, and no one could figure out that he was Superman? Because he had curly glasses, and the fact that he was 6'6" and weighed 300 pounds and had shoulders the size of a Buick never impressed anybody, I mean, nobody in the newspaper ever figured it out? Like, this is like what? Like, hello?
Jimmy Olsen liked them.
Yeah, well, Lois Lane was in love with him, but no reporter in the newspaper ever said, hey, wait a minute, but the idea, the myth is that who I am, that the visible structure of power in the world is an illusion. There is an alternative structure of power, which only I can see, because I have X-ray vision, right? Only I can see, and that allows me to imagine that I'm still a very important and powerful person, even though I'm living in a universe that keeps telling me that I'm not. And that's how our ancient and medieval relatives read this narrative. Yes.
Because if that's the case, how is it that you end up being sympathetic to Esau when he gets the birthright stolen?
Yeah. Well, see, the rabbis, because the rabbis, as they read the narrative, well, because first of all, the narrative has many layers to it. Okay, we've spoken about this in past years. So, as you'll see in a minute, one of the burdens of this narrative, it's a very overdetermined narrative, which means lots and lots of people had their fingers in it. One of the burdens of the narrative is to try to figure out why there is so much enmity between nations in the world. And one of the elements of this narrative is that it points out a structural flaw in monotheism. There is a terrible structural flaw in monotheism. Monotheism has a lot to say for it, you know, but there's a big structural flaw in that. If a polytheist has room for everybody. A pagan has room for everybody. When in Rome, pray like a Roman. I mean, there's room for everybody at the table in paganism. It's only when you say there's one God that you start to be exclusive and excluding. And the deep structural flaw in monotheism is this story. One blessing, two brothers. Two brothers, one blessing. So first of all, the question is, who told Father Isaac he only had one blessing? What kind of father is that? And what kind of monotheism is that? But if you say one God, one blessing, one God, one chosen people, one God, you know, one place of privilege in the world, you end up with this. You end up with endless enmity. So there's something that the Bible's dealing with. The rabbis pick that up, and they focus on, well, you'll see in a moment, this terrible scene at the end of the story when Asaph says, when he cries to his father, and for the first time in the story, you feel sorry for him. And the rabbis are going to say that's the condition of the world. And when Esau runs out of tears, that's when the Messiah will come. When the enmity among nations finally plays itself out, we realize we all have a place in the world, then the Messiah comes, then peace comes. So it's a complicated narrative. You're exactly right. There's another way to read this, and I just want to point that out so as we get into it, because it's such a juicy narrative. So the other way to read this is much like the way Freud read dreams. Remember Sigmund Freud, our dear friend, right? And in the interpretation of dreams. So what does Freud decide? Freud notices that we all dream. We all dream. Some of us remember our dreams, some of us don't. But we all dream when we sleep. You ever had that experience of waking up after a dream and going, whoa? I think we've all had that experience at some time. Well, what Freud says, isn't it interesting? The dream is of our own making. I made up the dream because it's in my head, right? No one made it up for me. It's mine. And yet, I didn't do it consciously, right? I didn't do it consciously. So for Sigmund Freud, the dream is an expression of your unconscious, the parts of your mind which you're not aware of. And at night, in the drama or the theater of your dreams, you get to play out all of the drama of your unconscious in symbolic forms. So everything in the dream is you, or me. Everything in the dream is of you. And what Freud does is he says, okay, let's take the dream. Tell me what this was. Tell me, what does this remind you of? Everything in the dream is an expression of you. Everybody get this, right? Do the same thing to the narrative. This is a map of the inner life of the Jewish people. Right? So everything in this narrative is us. So the question is, who is Esau in me? Who is the Esau in me? Who is the brute in us, collectively and individually? Who is the brute in the Jewish people? Who is the trickster in the Jewish people? What part of our character is represented by Jacob? Who is the mother, Rebecca? Who is the manipulative, handling, or whatever you want to call it, mother? And who is the blind father in us, and collectively as a people? And then individually as people. Who is Who are these characters in me? When is it that I'm acting out each of these roles? What is it in my own character that I'm doing when I act out each of these roles? And then it becomes really interesting. Then you're supposed to get up and say, "Stop talking about me, Rabbi," right? Right. That's because that's what this is. That's why it becomes such a compelling story, because it's speaking to something within. Does that make some sense? So as we get into this, that's the question we got to ask. Okay? We ready? You got the story ready? All right, so get yourself comfortable on the psychiatrist's couch, because here we go. Right? Ela Toldot Yitzchak. This is the story of Yitzchak. Now, first of all, in terms of Freud, if you want to raise Brother Freud, right? So Abraham is, again, sui generis. His father dies and he's out of the picture. Isaac is identified as Yitzchak ben Avraham. I had a men's group here at the shul for many years. And the first session, I had a friend of mine who was a rabbi come, and he said he had done something similar at his shul. He said, "You want to see a whole group of guys cry?" I said, "No." He said, "Watch." He said he gave every guy a pencil and a piece of paper, and he said, "Write your Hebrew name. Write your Hebrew name, okay? Yerachmiel ben Shlomo," right? Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to ask yourself the question, to what extent are you Yitzchak, and to what extent are you Ben Avraham? So every guy in the room, he said, who are you as your own man, and who are you as a son of your father? In what way are you just like your dad? And what have you inherited from your ancestors? It's a very interesting exercise. And I had a group of 100 men in a room, and he's right. They all start crying. Because they think about fathers and what fathers give us and what fathers demand of us and how that shapes us. Here is Yitzchak. He is the first Jew with a Jewish father and a Jewish mother. Okay? What does he gain from his parents, and what is of his own? And remember, his family life is a little different than yours, thankfully. Not many of your fathers took you to the top of a hill and tried to kill you. Okay? So, and there's a big question as we read this story. To what extent was Isaac shaped or warped by that experience? I mean, looking into the eyes of your father as he raises a knife over you can have a moment. I mean, that could do something to you, if you imagine, right? And your mother was out of the picture. Was she, was she facilitating this? Was she part of it? Was she not part of it? And at the end of the Akedah story, the end of the 2 weeks ago, everybody separates. Abraham comes down the hill, but alone. Isaac never comes down the mountain. And Isaac, you'll see, last week we discovered is living in Ber Chai L'Roi, which is where Hagar lives. He goes to the girlfriend's house, and Abraham goes to Hebron. And Abraham goes to Beersheba, even though he lives in Hebron. And Sarah dies. I mean, everyone is separated. No one talks to each other anymore. And now the story begins. Now we come back to the narrative again. You ready? So, Isaac was 40 years old when he took to wife Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean, Padamaram, sister of Lavan, the Aramean. It's a big emphasis on genealogy here. By the way, who arranged the marriage? Papa. How did Isaac meet his wife? Some enchanted evening. He was out davening mincha when the camel showed up, and Eliezer, who was the servant, says, "Mazel tov, here's your bride." Remember? So this is an interesting character. He comes down the mountain alone. There's no statement that Isaac ever came down the mountain from the sacrifice. His father arranges his marriage without his consent. And the servant, not the father, but the servant introduces him to his wife. You get the picture here? This is interesting. And then Abraham goes on and lives a life, and Isaac has nothing to do with it. And then Isaac dies, and he buries him with Ishmael. It's a very strange, the family has exploded. But now we come back to family again. Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren, and the Lord responded to his plea. So Abraham never did that. He never had that kind of... And his wife conceived, but the children struggled, and she said, "Why do I exist? This is horrible, I want to die." And she went to inquire of God, and God said, "Two nations in your womb, two separate peoples, issue from your body. One will be mightier than the other. The older shall serve the younger." And when it was time to give birth, there were twins. The first one emerged red like a hairy mantle all over, so they named him Esau. And his brother came holding onto his heels, so they named him Yaakov. And Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. So this is the beginning of the story. This is the opening. Okay, yes, please.
Hold on.
Douglas, thank you. Hold it up, here we go.
The interesting thing about that is that some of the scholars,
A little louder so everybody can hear.
some of the scholars have looked at that basically that poem about two children,
Right.
two nations are in your womb, and they said if you remove the Masoretic vowels
Right.
from that, it's very ambiguous as to who is going to serve who,
Right.
and therefore it leaves it up to us, and the Masoretes decided to make it their own.
Right.
Who is really going to be the leader?
There's a certain
We
amount
don't-
of
we don't
ambiguity
know
in
it.
Hebrew. Right.
And I think that
Right.
follows through on the rest of the story.
Right.
When we realize, when we get to the end of the story, and I don't want to beat this to death, but that Esau is the one who actually grows. Jacob never really grows. He remains the same person he's always been.
That's going to be the great question. Does Jacob change over the course of his
Esau
lifetime?
does. He's the one who forgives.
Esau does forgive, maybe. Again, it depends on how you read it, but there is a great deal, you're right, there's a great deal of ambiguity even in the language of the text about exactly what's going to happen. Two brothers, how they're going to live with each other. Do you want to add something, Marsh? Yes. Yeah.
When I read this, I think
You got to talk really loud so everybody can hear. We all have-
when I read this,
Yes.
I think, is this how we happen to have Hagar and Islam?
Not this story.
Not this story.
This story, Hagar in Islam comes in the Abraham story. Abraham's wife Sarah doesn't conceive. She does what is common in that world. She gives him the handmaid. Maid doesn't mean the cleaning lady. Handmaid is a lady in waiting. She's a woman of lower social status who's married to the master. Okay? That's Hagar. And Hagar conceives right away and has this kid. When Sarah becomes pregnant, she wants this kid gone so that her son will inherit. So she sends the kid out into the desert to die. But he survives with the grace of God. And you end up with the rejected child. Okay? Again, we've pointed this out before. The motif of Genesis is that human development and history are driven by siblings. Freud said it was by your parents. That's the Oedipal complex. But the Bible insists it's siblings. So you have Cain and Abel, the first two born brothers. One is going to be jealous, angry, and kill the other. Then you have the sons of Noah, and one of their own is going to be rejected. Then you have Abraham and Lot. Lot is his brother's kid. And they separate. But they don't have conflict, they separate. Then in the next generation, you have Isaac and Ishmael. Well, they don't have a particular conflict. The family exiles Ishmael. He's the exiled child. Now you get Jacob and Esau. And then later you're going to get Joseph and his brothers. And then finally you're going to end up with Moses and Pharaoh, who were sort of brothers, right? It's all about your brother. And the dynamic in each generation is, right, as the great rabbis, Tommy and what's his name, and Smothers Brothers once pointed out, mom loves you more, right? Who gets the blessing? Who gets the blessing? Who gets the blessing? And it's over and over and over again in the narrative. Two brothers, one blessing. Now, what happens to the rejected brothers? They find each other. So you'll see in a minute that Esau is going to end up in the camp of Ishmael. They're going to find each other. And what is the Torah of Esau and Ishmael? What's the Torah of the rejected brother? How do you find life, prosperity, peace? How do you find peace in the shadow of the rejection? Is going to be one of the underlying themes of this Torah. Because you're never going to make peace in the world until you can figure out, first of all, how to keep nobody from being rejected. And then what is the Torah of forgiveness and letting go of bitterness and resentment so you don't fill the world with rage? That's going to be one of the underlying questions here. So you have that part exactly right. That part's coming. Ready?
Can you do a diagram?
Yes, I can do it. I'll do a visual next week.
All those brothers, so I can remember.
Yeah, you just think of each generation. It's the same story over and over again, right? Michael's a famous TV writer. So, there's only 7 plots, right, in television?
3, maybe.
3, right. Well, the Torah only knows 1, you know. The boys grew up. Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the outdoors. Jacob was a mild man who stayed in camp. It's a beautiful image, right? Esau becomes the football player. He grows his hair. You know, he wears a Rams jersey. You know, he kills things for a living. He's big, hairy, physical, aggressive, powerful, and stupid. Jacob wears designer clothes, right? He wears cashmeres, you know, soft clothing. He does the New York Times crossword puzzle in pen. He plays Sudoku with his mother. You know, he brews cappuccinos. You have a sense of because Isaac favored Esau because he had a taste for game. Rebekah favored Jacob. Why did Isaac favor Esau? He was who he wasn't. Say that. In what way? Go ahead. That's good.
You have a guy, Isaac, who was helpless, almost sacrificed by his dad.
Yeah.
Who basically got the top spot by exile, so he didn't fight Ishmael for that.
Yeah.
Basically inherits, doesn't even go and get his own wife. Basically everything gets handed to him. And then you have another guy who's a son who can do everything he couldn't. He fought, killed,
Good.
won.
That's nice.
Everything.
So he's
What did he say?
Esau. I'll tell you what it is. Isaac is passive. Everything is done either to him or for him, right?
Asaph is the Marvel Comics superhero.
Yeah.
That
Sort of.
Isaac was.
Yeah, Asaph is this big, strong, powerful, aggressive. He's everything Isaac is not. He's what the psychologists call his shadow, right? Isaac dreams about being strong and powerful like his father, right? And when he has a kid, his kid resembles his father in that way because he's strong and powerful and fearless. He's fearless, right? And Isaac is filled with trepidation and fear. He's filled with trembling. The God in the Bible is called Pachad Yitzchak, Isaac's fear, right? And Esau is afraid of nothing, not afraid of spiders, okay? So he loves this kid. He loves this kid. And Rebekah, why does Rebekah love Jacob?
He's the husband she never had.
No, she's the husband never, but she's his she's like her brother. The brother is Laban, remember? Right? And it's time to adjust the thermostat. Can I tell you? Oh, actually, it's going to go down because it's going to keep getting warmer in here until we roast. Yeah, I promise. You like it? You can take your clothes off if you want, but it's a wonderful family. It's a wonderful image of this family, right? Right. She's raised in a house with Lavan, a home where people use language to express their feelings, a home where manipulation is normal, and that's the son she raises, right? She finds him charming. So it's a very interesting crossover, right? So you have this image of Jacob living with Rebekah, and they talk and talk and talk and talk all the time. And you have a son of Isaac, and you have an image of Isaac and Ishmael sitting by the fire at night with a case of beer, going, "How's it going?" "Fine." "Catch anything today?" "No." "Good." You know, that's a night's conversation. That's all. Men don't talk, right? We stare into the fire, drinking beer, looking contemplative, right? And there's not much talking that goes on. Isaac is like, Jacob's always talking. Talk, right? Yes.
That might be the familiar view, but the secular view of Isaac in the Parsha is a little different, that he is very proactive with the Philistines. He's making his mark in the land with the wells. He's fondling his wife in front of the Philistines. I mean,
that's the R-rated version. Mitzachek. He's more Mitzachek is the Hebrew. As you get in the world of business, in the world outside the house, he's active. He knows what he's doing. He's engaging politically with the neighbors in many different ways, right? It's only in the private sphere that he becomes silent. And is passive. And you'll see that again and again. Does it really? Really? No, it's the story about the kid who gets a part in the play. And his mother says, "What part did you get?" He said, "I play the Jewish husband." She said, "No, you go back and ask for a speaking part." You know? It's what it is. You schmuck. That's terrible. Once, now we're going to get, there's two windows into their character. First is the minor theme, and then is the major theme. Here's the minor theme. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew. Now wait a minute. A man cooking a stew? What kind of, well, yes, that's the point. That's what he does. He collects recipes from the times, and he has a nice, bouillabaisse going on the, or something interesting going on, ratatouille going on the stove, right? And Esau came in from the open. That's such a great phrase, right? V'yavo Esau minas sadeh. He comes in from the field. V'hu ayef, and he was exhausted. He's just burnt out. And he sees his brother. Esau says to Jacob, "Give me some of that red stuff." The Hebrew tries to give you the sense of a clipped, it's a sort of clipped staccato, right? All right? Haliteni na mina adom ha'adom hazeh. Haliteni means, won't you give me some of that? That's sort of the phrase in English you'd say. Won't you give me? Ha means is a question. Give me some of that stuff. Adom adom. He doesn't know the name of it. Right? What man knows ratatouille? That red stuff on the stove, right? What man knows, he just that, what you give me some of that. Ki ayef anochi, because I'm exhausted. I'll cane crush my, and so they called him Adom, then they called him red. Okay? And Yaakov says, "Sell me your birthright." Now, that's a joke. You can't sell a birthright. You're either the firstborn or you're not. If you're the firstborn, you get the birthright. What's the birthright? It's the double inheritance, right? It's the blessing. Okay? Now it's getting cold in here. You're right. All right? It's the double inheritance. I don't understand this system. Someday, one of you guys will buy me a system that works. Okay. I got it. So, you can't sell a birthright, but Jacob knows that Esau's too stupid to know this. So he's screwing with him. he's playing with him. Sell it to me. Right? So he says, and here he says, right? He says, "I'm at the point of death. Vayomer Esau, hine anochi holech lamut. I'm about to die. V'lama zeh bechora. What do I need a bechora for? What do I need a birthright for?" Right? And he says, "Swear to me." And he sold him the birthright. He sold him the birthright. Okay? And he gave him the stew. And then the narrative ends. If you could possibly read the last two lines in the Hebrew on page 148, there's an extraordinary sentence. Vayakov natan le'esav lechem unazida dashim. He gave him bread and he gave him the stew, the lentil stew, it says. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 verbs in a row. 5 verbs in a row that all begin with a vav, right? Listen to the rhythm of this thing, right? Vayachal vayesh vayakom vayelech vayibez Esav et bechorah. He ate and he drank, he got up and he left, and spurned his birthright. Vayobaz means to spurn something, to give it up, to disparage it, to dishonor it, to waste it. And he wasted it because he didn't understand it, because he didn't understand what it meant, because he didn't understand how valuable it was, because it meant so little to him that he would swap it for a bowl of stew. So even though you can't legally buy a birthright, the sense, and he says, Lama zeh bechor, what do I need it for? What does it mean to me? Gives you a sense of his character. Plus the sense of a man who is entirely his physicality with no hesitation. There's no humanity here. He comes in and he eats and he drinks and he gets up and he leaves. There's no humanity. There's no connection. That's the image of Esau that's given here. Yes, Mike. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay, isn't that the proof text that Esau was the firstborn? How you can't sell something you don't have.
Yeah, he is the firstborn.
Esau.
Yeah, Esau, but we were told in the previous that Esau was the firstborn. We knew that he was the firstborn. The question is should he be the firstborn? Because this is going to be the question in all the narratives. Who should inherit? Who should take the family mantle? And it's interesting that it's not property. It's not property they're arguing over. You would think that, in most families, when there's an argument, it's who gets the property. Mom and dad leave this world, and they leave behind, and families argue over who gets the property. But in this case, it's not the property. There's something else. It's the status of being the patriarch of the clan. It's the status of having the covenant. Although the covenant doesn't seem to be at work here. It's a question of who's going to lead and who deserves it. Whose character deserves it? That's the question here.
I think it's the blessing.
Yeah?
I think it's the blessing.
And a blessing goes with it. But the question, we'll see in a minute about the blessings, whether the blessings really matter. But see, it's this sort of, you'll see in a moment what we're going to ask the question, what does Esau really want? What does Esau really want here? All right, Pop has the mic.
Hold on.
It's a great narrative. It's just a fun narrative.
When Esau asked for the blessing, didn't he realize he had sold it?
What? Didn't he realize he'd sold it?
Yeah, when he asked for
No, first of all, either he forgot, because it was years before, or it didn't mean anything to him.
So they carry it through the years. They make a contract and then they break it.
Imagine that.
They make a treaty and then they break it.
Yeah, or they forget about what they said or didn't say.
So it's a tradition that's been kept on for generations.
Yeah, you promised me. You borrowed something and never gave it back. You told me you would do something and you never came through. You said something and you never apologized. 40 years later, you cut the turkey, right? You cut the turkey. I don't know how many of you watch Avalon, but it's every Jewish family, You cut the turkey, right? This is what happens in families, right? This is why it's such an irony that the Bible chooses family as the vessel to pass on religious truth. Because of all of the ways to pass on religious truth, this is the most fragile. Because family's really fraught. It's really a mess. No family is clean and easy. Well, mine is, of course, but yours. No family is clean and easy. It's all this way. It's always this way, right? It's just why it's ironic that you have in the Christian tradition that Jesus has disciples but no family. Because if Jesus had a sister-in-law, it'd be a very different tradition. If Buddha had a sister-in-law, let's see him keep his composure in a Jewish family. You imagine Buddha coming to your Pesach table, Well, yeah, exactly. And you said, you borrowed and you didn't give it. Let's keep your equanimity in the world. Keep your centered, eternal equanimity in the world in the face of a sister-in-law or brother-in-law. That's exactly right. This is what's so interesting about this. Family is such a powerful method of passing on religious identity and truth, and at the same time, it's so fraught with conflict. It's so difficult. Who had a hand up over here? Someone had a hand up. Hang on, Daryl. You're going to be immortal now. You're going to put you on.
I didn't sign a disclosure.
It's okay. You're in the synagogue. It's an automatic.
All right. So why do we then, as Jews, idolize family?
Because, well, first of all, I don't know. Tell me why. This is because it's a tradition. Tradition. Because that's how we do it. I mean, that becomes it's always been since the very beginning. Because we see ourselves as a family. Because as a people, we're a family. And because family has always been the vessel for passing on the identity, right? But it's fraught. It's really fraught. It's really difficult. Yes, in the back, sir, please.
In answer to the question about family, could one not say that that's where we live and grow?
Yeah, because that's where you gain your own identity in your space. You're exactly right. It's fundamental. It's very fundamental to who we are. But at the same time, when you associate religious truth with family, you run the risk of this, which is all the conflicts and difficulties of family then are carried into your religious life. I don't know if you read the news, but Jews have a really hard time getting along, and because we treat each other like a family. It's really very interesting, and you wonder, why do we do this, Why look at Israel now? I mean, Israel's been through 2 governments, and they're probably going to have a 3rd election now. They're trying to figure out, for a small country in a difficult place in the world, you'd think they'd have gotten this down. But we're a family, and all the kinds of grudges and insults and personal, emotional conflicts that enter into family life, enter into our collective life. Yes, please.
I think idolizing the family goes back to the first mitzvah of pru urvu that God has given. And in order to do that, to raise children, it's best in a frame of a family.
Yeah, except that you see, it's true, but you don't have to. Family doesn't have to be the method of passing on religious truth. There are other ways of doing it. It's our way. It's been effective. Look, we're still here, so it's been effective. It's just so. What the Torah itself is saying is, look what you're doing. You're schlepping in all of this conflict. Okay? Yes, please, Brian.
I was just going to answer the question about why does family matter, we have all these conflicts. If you look at these stories as a lens, through a lens of family conflict and what could be the outcome if people don't get along.
Yeah.
But then you look at the 12 tribes and what they accomplished when they got together.
Yeah.
And how they conquered Canaan together.
Well.
So if you look at it,
it
reminds me, and it also reminds me of the story of what you were saying. I think during was it Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah? You were saying that when the Romans were at the gates.
Yeah.
That the reason
we're killing each other
was because we were fighting amongst ourselves.
Right.
So you could look at it. We have these natural conflicts.
Right.
And that's the genesis, but the development is if we can come together.
Yeah. That's the great miracle.
What can we achieve together?
Exactly.
And that's what you have in Israel with all these fantastic, innovations and achievements. And
if we can get together.
Yeah. But I mean, after 70 years, we've done a great job. But.
Right. And God becomes a member of the family. So we have this interesting relationship with God because he becomes part of the family. So he's subject to all the same schmutz, all the same conflict. All right, let's get to the narrative. 153. When Isaac was old and his eyes were too dim to see, he called his oldest son Esau and said to him, "My son," and he said, "Here I am." And he said, "I'm old now and I do not know how soon I may die. Take your gear, your quiver and bow, go out into the open and hunt me some game. Then prepare me a dish for me as I like, and bring it to me so that I may give you my innermost blessing. Ba'avor tivarechecha nafshi, my soul blessing, before I die." Abraham never blessed his kids. There's no sentence that Abraham blessed his kids. Jacob blesses his kids on his deathbed in Egypt. Moses blesses his children, the tribes, on his deathbed in the last Parsha of the Torah. Deathbed blessings are the thing. So Isaac says, "I'm going to die. It's time for me to bless you." Only we know that he's going to live another 20 years. Right? So, who knows? I mean, he just feels like it's time to bless. And his eyes are too dim to see. Why? Come on, give me, why is he blind? What does it mean to be, to what is he blind? So, Mel, what did you say? He has macular degeneration. No, you're right. It could be, but you do get, there's a great deal of eye disease in the desert. And he lives in the south, by the way, right? Every patriarch lives in a different section of the country. Abraham lives in Hebron, and Yaakov lives in Shechem, and Yitzchak lives in Beersheba. He lives out in the desert. You live in the desert, you get eye disease. All right, that's true. Why else? He is blind. To what is he blind? To how did he get blind? I'm sorry, what? To what Esau really is. Yeah, he could be blind to his own children's character. Imagine that, a father who doesn't see his kids objectively. Disconnected, sees virtues where there are faults and faults where there are virtues. Imagine that, right? And how did he get that blind? Tell me about his father again. What was the last thing we saw Isaac see? He looks up and sees his father ready to kill him. That has got to do a number on you. The Midrash, of course, says that Abraham is crying through the ritual, and his tears mix with Isaac's tears, and that's why Isaac is blind. Interesting. So you get this. I'm going to add something, please. Yeah.
I was just going to say maybe he's also blind to his wife.
He's also blind to his wife. He loves his wife. By the way, they have the most passionate affair of all the patriarchs. They actually, because it says that she comforts him from the death of his mother. Thank you, Dr. Freud. Right? They have this incident in Abimelech where he's actually, they actually have a relationship. They actually have a closer relationship than the others. But let's see what happens. Right? And so you begin with this formal call and response, which is the Torah's signal that something momentous is about to happen. And for just a moment, just imagine just this Torah portion. This is the key. Because this is going to happen, so Jacob's going to go into exile, and that's where he's going to marry his wives, and that's where he's going to get his kids. And because of all of this, Jacob will raise his kids in a way that completely duplicates the way his parents raised him, and there will be rivalry among the brothers, and Joseph will end up in Egypt. You following me? And we will end up in Egypt after Joseph, and Moses will take us out of Egypt and bring us to Mount Sinai, and all of Jewish history is launched. This doesn't happen, all of Jewish history is dull. The whole drama of our people starts right here. 2 brothers, 1 blessing. Go get me the food I like, and I'll give you my... See, if Esau only had a freezer, Jewish history would have never happened. He'd have gone to the freezer, thrown it in a microwave, in 10 minutes would have prepared a dish for his dad. Done. But if you have to go out and actually hunt the damn thing, it takes a while. Right? Rebekah had been listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. Everybody see that? His son Esau? What do you mean, his son Esau, Kimosabi? Not her son? When Esau had gone out into the open to hunt to bring home game, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, that's right. If only she had gotten the call from on high. Don't do this, it's dangerous, right? His son Esau, her son Jacob. Does that tell you anything? I overheard your father speaking. Shamati et avicha midaber. Not overheard, I heard your father speaking. El Esau achicha. To Esau, your brother. Saying, bring me some game and prepare me a dish that I may bless you with the Lord's approval. With the Lord's approval? Does the Lord enter into anything Isaac said? That she added. With the Lord's approval. She gets it. With the Lord's, you see that? That's the first time God has been evoked in the whole story. God has been absent from this whole story. You see it here? You have the same text I do, right? You see God telling anybody anything? Well, she had that prophecy, but we don't know what that meant. With the Lord's approval before I die. Now my son, get it? Ve'ata b'ni, shema b'koli. Listen to me, kid. Right? Go, as I instruct you, go to the flock, fetch me 2 kids, 2 choice kids. I'll make them a dish for your father such as he likes. Then take it to your father to eat in order that he may bless you before he dies. Oh, God. What does she want? What does she want to happen here? What is her vision? What is her vision? Elevate Jacob. Well, they're both her sons, but elevate Jacob. Elevate Jacob. What does Isaac want to do? Elevate Esau. According to the rule, you give it to the firstborn. But the idea of, go make me a meal and then I'll bless you. Why go make me a meal and then I'll bless you? Why not just come here, I'll bless you? If he really thought he was going to die imminently, why mess with the meal? And by the way, if you're going to die of something, eating game, eating roast meat probably isn't going to help matters. I've been in the hospital a dozen times in my life. Never have they brought me, venison, You get hospital food. Yeah, I think it's this image of the men who sit quietly at the fire. This is what they do. These men sit quietly at the fire, and he's so in love with his son and his power. his power to do things in the world that he can't do. As you said before, his shadow. Yes, please, yeah. Hang on. Sorry.
Prepare a meal is to create an atmosphere for the ceremony that blessing is involved in.
Yeah.
That's the reason.
Yes, I know, but why a meal? Why not,
Yeah, because he could have asked them for, in other situations, people ask for song, ask for...
Yeah, or a sacrifice, something. It's not a prepare a meal for God. It's not a sacrifice. It's make me a meal. Show me your power, and I want to share one more time, what you're able to do. It's a very interesting image, isn't it? Who else in the Bible gets blessed over dinner? Right? Jacob, when Jacob dies at the end of the days, he's on his deathbed. He blesses the kids. Right? When Moses dies, he's on the mountain. No one says, prepare me a meal. I like this, by the way. I'm telling my kids. Call our favorite Chinese restaurant. Bring me what I want. I'll bless you. I don't care who shows up. I don't care. Whoever brings it first,
But we do that every Shabbos.
Is that, in a certain, we said that, but yeah.
We do bless the kids.
But Jacob doesn't do it. When Jacob blesses the kids, he's on his deathbed. Right? Yeah, Michael.
Hold on.
Hang on. You get immortalized here.
Well, you're going very deep here, but even just on the surface of what we've learned in the last few minutes, we've got a food theme. We've got the first interaction around
soup.
Around the soup, and then the second interaction again around food. I'm dying of hunger. Give me something.
Yeah. So tell me what that means. No, don't put it away yet. What does that mean? What does food mean to a family? What does food mean to a person? Why a food theme? You're exactly right. It's wonderful.
No, I'm really not sure.
Well, come on. What does food mean?
Well, in a family, it's often the center of a gathering.
Yeah.
So connection that way.
It's the connection. It's life. It's sustenance. It's plenty. It's plenty. Right? How many times in the Bible does stuff happen because there's famine in the land? Remember? Famine in the land. So now the opposite of famine in the land is there's feast. Go make me a feast. We just had Thanksgiving. Didn't you all have Thanksgiving the other day? Didn't you roast this enormous poultry bird, right? Stuff it with challah, and God knows what else. Cornbread, green beans, mashed sweet potatoes, pumpkin pie. You're not as religious as we are, so sorry. Right? Feasting. What does feasting say? Family. There's plenty. It's blessing. It's a visible symbol of blessing. Right? So this alternation between famine and feast. We have feast. We have plenty, my son. I want to give to you my blessing over a feast. It's a very, very important observation. Yes?
How come that Jacob sends Esau out to hunt, make him a meal, and the wife, much smarter, Rebecca, much smarter, just takes 2 kids from the flock that they have, and he didn't have to go hunt?
Yeah, she goes to the freezer and takes out a roast something or other. And right, that's exactly the question. And Jacob's smart enough to know, because he has a sense, because he subscribes to one of these culinary magazines. Jacob answered his mother. But my brother is a hairy man and I'm smooth-skinned. Pop's going to know. If my father touches me and I appear to him as a trickster, I'll bring curse upon myself, not a blessing. Right? So he's not worried about the immorality about what he's supposed to do. He's only worried about getting caught. Right? And the absurdity about going in and taking advantage of your blind father by imitating your brother, by impersonating your brother, and stealing the blessing. And that the blessing has objective power independent of who it goes to. Independent of who it goes to, right? It's not like an airline ticket that has your name on it, I mean, if he blesses him thinking he's Esau, he stays blessed. Do you see how crazy this is? It assumes that you think that, right? But the mother said what Jewish mothers have said for the next 5,000 years. Your curse be upon me, my son. Do what I tell you. Oy vey. That is the launching of the whole enterprise of psychotherapy. That sentence alone carries 5,000 years of psychotherapy. He got the dish. His mother prepared it. She took the best clothes of her son Asaph, which were in the house, and her younger son Jacob put him on. She covered his hands with the skin of the kids. She put in his hands the dish, and he enters into the tent. And now, Chris, the great drama is, what does Isaac know, and when did he know it? What does Isaac know, and when? Does he know who he's blessing, right? And he says to him, Father. And right away, the father said, who are you? Which one of my sons are you? So right away, I mean, you know right away, this nishkusher. Right away, the father knows something's wrong. So it's no pretense in this sense. Like, he knows something's wrong, but what's the calculation now? What's Isaac's calculation? Now, so for a moment, just imagine the following thing. Isaac only knows Esau. He doesn't know Jacob. Because Jacob hangs around with his mother. Isaac only knows Esau. Isaac loves Esau's power. He loves Esau's aggressive authority. He loves Esau's self-confidence, his fearlessness. This man who has spent his whole life living in fear loves his boy's fearlessness. And the other kid walks in and says, Father, and right away he knows who it is. Because he asks him, which one of my sons are you? So what's his calculation? He knows something's up, but what's his calculation? Go ahead.
He's a blind man who's about to see his son for the first time.
And what does he see?
That's the question. Who are you?
Who are you? What's coming in a minute?
What are you, my son?
Who are you? What are you?
Why couldn't he tell by the voice?
Well, he could tell by the voice. He could tell by the smell. He could tell by the food. He could tell 100 different ways. Besides, he's a prophet. God does what he does. Just God tells him, hey, wrong kid, you know. Try getting on an airplane with a ticket that doesn't have your name on it. God, try. I mean, if Delta Airlines can figure this out, Isaac can figure it out, right? But the point is, that's the point. The kid walks in, and Isaac says, oh my God, there's something in him I didn't think he had. I thought he was a mirror of my fearfulness, a mirror of my passivity, a mirror of my impotence. I thought this kid had no value because he's everything that I hate in myself. And suddenly, what do I see? This kid might have some guts. He might have some guts, some cunning of my wife. He might have some strength. He might have some of the power of my father. He might have something in him, right? And he says, I am Esau, your firstborn. I've done as you told me. Pray, sit up, and eat of my gain, that I may give you your innermost blessing. Those are more words than Esau ever spoke in his life. That's how he knew right away, because the kid comes in and he speaks in beautiful Shakespearean cadences, you know, right? Esau would have said, Pop, here, food. Good food. Beer? Cold. You know? Esau says, pray, my father, rise and eat, and let your soul be filled with blessings. Which are you sons? Who are you? You know, Laurence Olivier's now living in my house, right? And Isaac said, how'd you succeed so quickly? Of course he knows. And he said, because the Lord your God granted me good fortune. Oh, sure. Right? And Isaac said, come closer that I might feel you, my son, whether you're really my son Esau or not. Oh, come on. Are you having fun with this? Yeah. I am. So Jacob drew closer and felt him and wondered. Here's the line, right? The voice is the voice of Jacob. The hands are the hands of Esau. Okay, that's the line. So you can read that with a sense of wonderment, right? Or you can read that's the blessing. Because what do you get in these two men? Each of them is a half a man. They're twins, so they get split in half. They're half a man. And he said, you know, if you had the intelligence of Yaakov and the power of Esau, you'd be somebody. You'd be my father. You'd be Abraham. You'd be a worthy heir to Abraham. But the problem is you only show me half of yourself, right? You have the cunning and the verbal ability and the trickster, and you have the power and the aggression. You have the loyalty and you have the ability. And if you put you together, you'd have one whole person, right? That's the line. Yet he did not recognize him because his hands were hairy. So we asked him, verse 24, right? Vayomer, atazeh b'ni Esau? Atazeh b'ni Esau? Atazeh b'ni Esau? And Isaac's answer is, and Jacob's answer is, Ani, I am. And the Midrash says, he didn't lie. He just said, Ani, you know, Ani, I am. And he says, serve me, then let me eat, so I can give you my innermost blessing. So he served him, and he ate. And he said, come close and kiss me. And he went up and he kissed him, and he smelled him and said, the smell of my son is the smell of the fields that the Lord has blessed. May the Lord give, here's the blessing. May the Lord give you of the dew of heaven, the fat of the earth, the abundance of new grain and wine. Let peoples serve you and nations bow to you, and let your mother's son bow to you. Be cursed be who curse you, and blessed they who curse you. Bless them who bless you. All right, did anybody see anything interesting about that blessing? What's it about? What's that blessing about? Look at the blessing again. What is it about? Of the dew of the heaven, the fat of the earth, the abundance of new grain and wine. What's that?
That God said that if you listen to my mitzvahs and my commandments, I will do that for you.
That's coming later in Deuteronomy, right? That's coming later in Deuteronomy.
But I know that already.
Yes, I know. See, then the Torah knows you know. That's why it's... The first part is about wealth, right? The abundance of the land is about prosperity. And then what's the second part? It's about might, right? It's power. Prosperity. Whose blessing is that? Is that Jacob's blessing or Esau's blessing?
Esau.
That's Esau's blessing. Those are the things that Esau wanted most out of the world. Prosperity and power. Right? That's not a Jewish blessing. I mean, how many of you blessed your kids Friday night by saying, you should be rich and powerful? Umain, you know? You say, you simcha Elohim, you should be rich like Warren Buffett and powerful. You don't say that. It's an interesting blessing, right? It's not the blessing Abraham got from God. It's a very interesting, it's the blessing that was meant for Esau. Daryl has a question.
I'm going to take your time. I'm here all week. Anyway. So, but...
That's true.
the whole... That blessing is antithetical to most of our teaching, if not all of it.
Yeah.
But it's all, this blessing scenario is all under the cloud of deceit, self-blindness, family conspiracy. It just sounds like a really bad place. So it's a bad blessing under bad circumstances with bad people. So
right.
How do you make sense? Again, I'm with him. I don't have a answer to this.
Okay.
It sounds like
hold on. It's about to get worse. I'm going to make it worse. No sooner had Jacob left the presence of Isaac than Isaac finished blessing him, then his brother came back from the hunt. In movies, they call this, uh-oh. Dum, dum, dum. He too prepared a dish, and he said, let my father sit up and eat of his son's game so he may give me his innermost blessings. And his father said to him, who are you? Okay, remember, the questions are what the story is all about. Who are you? For the first time in his life, Isaac begins to see his two sons for who they really are. Right? Who is Esau? He is mindless, but he's loyal. Completely loyal. Right? Not bright, doesn't reflect, but loyal. Right? And his father said, who are you? And he said, I am your son Esau, your firstborn. Bechorcha. I am your Bechor. And Isaac was seized with a trembling and said, who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? And I ate of it before you came, and I blessed him. And now he must remain blessed. Gam Baruch Yihiyeh. That's an interesting phrase. Gam Baruch Yihiyeh. He's going to stay blessed. Right? And when Esau heard this, he burst into wild, bitter sobbing and said, bless me too, Father. Barcheni gam ani avi. But he answered, your brother came with guile and took away your blessing. And Esau said, that's why he supplanted me twice. First he took away my birthright, and now my blessing. Now he remembers the birthright story, right? Have you not reserved a blessing for me? Right? Hello, atzaltali bracha. Don't you have a blessing for me? And Isaac said, but I've made him master of you. I've given him your brothers and servants and sustained him with grain and wine. What then can I do for you? And Esau said, have you but one blessing, Father? That's the question. Have you but one blessing? Right? You're such a great man. Barcheni gamani. Right? Bracha achat hilecha. You only have one blessing? One blessing? And his father said to him, your abode shall enjoy the fat of the land, the dew of the heaven, but by your sword you will live and you will serve your brother. That's a pretty weak blessing. right? And he harbored a grudge. What does Esau want most of all?
Father's love.
He wants his father's love. The content of the blessing is irrelevant. It's really, Esau's whole modus is loyalty. It's loyalty to his father. He just wants his father's approval and his father's love, right? He doesn't understand covenant. He doesn't understand family. He doesn't understand any of this stuff. What he understands is my father's approval. I want my father's love. And the father who has given it away, was given it away to the other brother, right? So this is the brokenness. This is the brokenness. This is why the story ends up with this tragic ending, this brokenness, this vendetta of brother and brother. So just like the Akedah story, we're right with you. Just like the Akedah story, the sacrifice story, where nobody sees each other again in the story, same thing's going to happen here. The family explodes once again. For the second generation, the family explodes. Okay. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you would characterize Esau the way you did.
Yeah.
Which is what the rabbis did, saying that he was not too bright. Esau is not stupid.
No.
I mean, the language that's used here indicates that he is much deeper than the story starts out with. He's a much deeper person.
So you like an Esau that grows. I appreciate that.
He does grow.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
More than that, a person who goes out and hunts in the fields.
Yeah.
And is a hunter, can also at the same time be
a poet.
A poet. He can be a poet.
I don't think so, Mike. I think the idea is that I get it. You're right.
Let me give you an example.
He grows. He may grow, but I think that he's motivated by his physicality.
He is.
And his physicality motivates him to be completely loyal. That kind of person ends up with a complete loyalty.
But let me give you
Go ahead.
concrete example.
Yeah.
I'm going to use myself.
Okay.
I played 4 years of varsity football.
Oh, my God.
Okay?
That explains a lot.
I was a tackle. I was also on the Literary Society. I also was in the school plays. I was also the editor of the newspaper. You can be one, and you can also be the other.
Okay. I get it. No, I get it. You're right. It doesn't but the character is drawn in such a way as to give us a sense that his physicality comes first, and maybe only later, because later we'll see that he comes back. And you're right; he becomes a very admirable character later. But at the moment, I think it's this sense of physicality, and the loyalty comes from his kishkas. I mean, literally. I mean, it's this sense of that's why the meal has to be part of the blessing. Because his loyalty is that kind of physical loyalty.
I don't think we should color him.
No. I'm not saying that he's stupid. I'm just saying that he doesn't have the reflective character, the intellectual power of his brother. And his brother doesn't have his basic sense of common morality. The brother is painted horribly. And that's what's so ironic about this story, because Jacob is us. This is our self-portrait. So I asked you before, who is this character in me? Who is the Esau in me? Who is the Jacob in me? Who is the Rebekah? Who is the Isaac? And then when you look at the Jewish people as a collective, that's what this is. It's our collective mirror. Who is the Esau in us? Who is the Esau in us? This aggressive, powerful, but unreflective character. Okay? And then who is the Jacob? Who is the Jacob in us? Jacob is our namesake. We are Israel. So the question is, who does this reflect in us? What part of our own character does this reflect in us? Right? Yes, please.
It seems that Isaac knowingly gave the blessing to Jacob.
Yeah.
He knew that it was not Esau. He wasn't tricked by
Well,
Jacob.
yeah, 4 times he asks him, like, who are you? I mean, why would you ask that if you didn't have suspicion, right?
Because he come to a conclusion that the Jacob is a better candidate to have the leadership than Esau.
Yeah, because he shows him something he didn't think that he had. But the question, does Isaac, who spent his whole life under the shadow of an older brother who was exiled from the family, does Isaac realize what he's just done? He's dropped a bomb in the middle of his family, right? Does he realize what he's just done? Do these characters realize what happens in a family if you bless one and don't bless the other, or you bless them in a hierarchical fashion? That becomes the great question. And again, I said at the beginning, I think that one of the motivations of this story is to point out this terrible flaw in monotheism. And it's this question that Esau asks his father. Have you but one blessing? Is there only one way in the world? Is there not room for us for each of us who bring different gifts to the world? Isn't there room for the other? And the Midrash picks this up and says the Messiah will come when Esau runs out of tears. In the meantime, we run like hell. I mean, because you have a brother who hates you. This is what happens when you choose one and you don't have a blessing. When human beings walk the world saying, bless me too, Father. Let's get one more comment, and then I have to run in the shul because, believe it or not, I have a job. I have a part-time job here at Valley Beth Shalom.
I think our Midrash has an interest painting Esau as the bad guy. Because after all, we have to accept what Isaac, Jacob did. You know, and that's hard to swallow.
I think you're right, except I think that you're right. Of course you're right. But it's a more sophisticated text than that. You and I want to read it that way. And if you ever read the Midrash, if you ever open up some of the Midrash, they flatten the characters out. And they make Esau the bad guy and Jacob the good guy. And they say this is a triumph because the right kid got the covenant. But if you read the Torah is much more sophisticated than that. The Torah understands no good guys and bad guys. Jacob did something despicable, manipulated his father, his blind father, right? Stole a birthright, lied about. I mean, Jacob is not a beautiful character here. There's nothing righteous in what he did. And Esau is not a villain here. That this is a much more sophisticated story, right? And at the end, the writing is brilliant. At the end, you mamish feel sorry for him. Yeah, he's a brute, but he's a brute with a soul. He's a brute with a soul. And when we meet him, we're going to meet him again in 3 weeks. 2 weeks. Not next week, the week after. 2 weeks. We're going to meet him again in 2 weeks. We're going to see what happens to him in the interim. He's a brute. It's true. And maybe it's not who we wanted as an ancestor, except there's a part of us that is him. And the question is, it's the loyalty. I mean, it's the love, it's the loyalty, I'll do anything for my father. Right? I'll go out in the woods and I'll wrestle a bear because that's what he wants for lunch. You know, that sense, that's going to become part of the Jewish people. That's going to become part of us. If at our best, that's going to become part of us. Right? And sometimes the worst of Jacob becomes part of us. So it's much more, you're right, it's easy to turn this into a melodrama, good guys and bad guys, white and black, right? It's much more fun to see this as nuanced, much more interesting, much deeper analysis, much deeper portrait of the inner life of the Jewish people, to see this as a sophisticated story. Thank you all. Have a wonderful Shabbat and a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend. Go to the mall and buy.